Hello, good afternoon. It's once again time for the weekend preview. David Johnson's the man in the hot seat this week, our flat editor, and it's the Future Champions Festival at Newmarket this weekend, headlined of course by the Dewhurst, which has a habit of throwing up a classic contender.
Certainly does, doesn't it? Aidan O'Brien, I think, has won the last three. He's won it with horses that have gone on to win the 2,000 guineas, and you'd be surprised if whatever wins tomorrow isn't pretty much a short price favourite for the 2,000 guineas next May. Yeah,
it should be a really informative day, but that's not where we're going to start. We're going to start with everyone's, the easiest betting proposition.
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't take much finding, does it? The winner of the Cesarewitch.
Oh, I know. Is it 34 or 35 tomorrow?
I think we've got 35, have we?
Spoiling us with that extra one, yeah. So it's probably the best place to start, I think, anyway, is with Willie Mullins, because he has 7 runners, and the most interesting of those, from a starting point anyway, is Stratum, because a bit of a gamble was landed last year from the same yard and the same ownership.
That's right, yes, and they've already won one really valuable prize with him earlier in the season, wasn't it, that JLT Cup at Newbury. They then really got stuck into him in the Ebor. It's not often you see a horse go off 3-1 for a race as competitive as that, and he just didn't have the chance to do show what he could do, basically. It was one of the rare races at the meeting where they stayed more towards the far side. Things got messy. He was one of the worst affected, and it's just a race to draw a line through. I mean, my issue with him is he went up £8 for winning that JLT. Okay, it's worked out okay when you look at a bit further back, like I think the 5th, 6th and 7th, you know, those kind of horses, they came out and boosted it, but a little bit closer to those of the principals, they've not really boosted it themselves. And you know, we talk about Connections last year landing this race. They did it with a horse much lower in the weights, whereas Stratum, he comes here, he's 5th in the race card, he's got a mark of 102. Is he on his way to group races? I'm not convinced. So there's certainly one horse in here that might be, and is a bigger price. So Stratum, you can see why he's favourite based on that information from last year, but I don't mind taking him on.
Yeah, I mentioned that Mullins has got 7 runners. Which of the 7 would you prefer of those so far?
The most interesting of the Mullins ones for me was this Low Sun. Don't know too much about him really until I started looking into the videos, but he stays well over jumps, and he won a race over 2 miles, I think it was, at the Curragh earlier in the season. Then they had to run him another time to get him qualified. If you remember, they've changed the conditions. Every horse that runs in this to be qualified has to have run at least twice. So they found possibly the most ideal race that wouldn't suit him, in terms of they dropped him back to 1.5 miles. They ran him at Bellestown, which just does not suit a strong galloper like what Low Sun is, and that qualified him for it, and he also got his mark dropped £1. I can see the 2.25 mile trip of this really suiting him. Shamey Heffen on board certainly won't be lacking. You know, looking at the jockey bookings of all the Mullins horses, it's impossible to read anything into it. He's got jockeys riding for him that are rarely ridden, never ridden for him, sometimes that often ride for him. You know, but I don't think you can read a lot into it. And Shamey Heffen on board, I can see Low Sun going really well.
It must be a strange sensation for you to get a taste of some of these Mullins runners watching jumps races.
Exactly, yeah. I've certainly had to go through a fair few races at the Punchestown Festival and the like, and you know, I certainly wasn't expecting having to do that.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot has been said about Vis-a-Vis this week. Is it he one who's catching your eye as well, or?
Well, he's got a profile similar to some horses that have won it quite recently, in that he's with a jumps yard. Against that, he hasn't actually had any races over jumps. He's an ex-French that has won 2. He's 2 from 2 for Current Connections, and interestingly, in terms of tactics, he looks quite versatile. I think, was it his last win, he made all. The run at Sandown, he came from off the pace, so whatever Connections deemed to do, it shouldn't be an issue with him. And you know, he's just a lightly raced horse that's going the right way. And interestingly, you know, Sylvester de Souza takes the ride. He's won the last 2 Cesarewitches. He presumably wasn't short of offers this time around, so you know, it does look interesting that Neil Mulholland has booked him.
Now, you probably expect Aidan O'Brien to be thinking more seriously about the Dewhurst, which is before this on the card, but he does actually have the joint or second favourite for this race in southern France.
Yeah, and I think, you know, his taking part is sort of that pointer to how much a more valuable race it is nowadays. You know, they've doubled the prize money virtually. I think it's going to be even more valuable next year, with the idea of, you know, attracting those higher grade of horses rather than just your handicappers but your borderline group horses. And we know this horse is a group horse. He's got the form in the book that says he is. Ran well at Royal Ascot in the Queen's Vase, and then he put up a career best in the St Leger last time. Everything he's done in his career so far suggests that 2 miles and further is going to suit at least as well as what the 1 3/4 of the St Leger does. And I think you look at the horses that he was ahead of in the St Leger, the likes of Old Persian, there was DXB as well that he was in front of. Now they've all got BHA ratings well in excess of 107, so it doesn't take long to start thinking that 107 potentially underestimates him. And a 3-year-old taking on the older horses over this sort of trip, statistically we know that's an advantage. And you know, you mentioned is he second favourite or joint favourite? For me, he wants to be clear favourite.
And then there's loads and loads of overlapping form in here as well, and one that you have pointed out for me to mention it is the form of the Mallard. There's 4 in here that reoppose from that.
Yeah, exactly. Plenty of them. Speedo Boy, I think, didn't get the best of runs in the Mallard. He's not got a great deal of luck with the draw today. If he'd have been slightly lower drawn, I'd have been interested in him. Still wouldn't be surprised if he ran a big race at around 25 to 1. Just in Time Wonder Mallard has a penalty here, so I'd be slightly worried about whether he'd be able to maintain those placings with a horse that caught my eye in the Mallard, and that was the Glasgow Warrior. He's tried this kind of trip before and seemed not to stay, but he's a year older now. He could be that bit stronger, and if you watch the Mallard back, you certainly say he looks like he wants a little bit further than that 14.5 furlongs. Who knows what's going to happen in that last 2 furlongs, but he's another one that has a good draw. The Mallard shows he's on a mark that he can go very, very close from, and I think he's about 33 to 1, so I wouldn't put anybody off, you know, trying to, if there is going to be a big price shock, he's one of the more likely ones perhaps.
He's also loves a tale of woe, doesn't he, the Glasgow Warrior? I think a couple of times in the past he
might be one of those horses that can be a little bit tricky and sometimes doesn't win as many races as what his ability suggests, but against that we get these big races where you got you know, 6 or 7 places each way, 33 to 1. You're going to get a good run for your money if you're backing in with those extra places, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we could sit here and mention every runner in this race. That's how competitive. But there's another one in here that you think is interesting in Cleonte as well.
Yeah, I think he might be the most interesting of the lot in terms of a bet. In that, I think he's still, is he about 14 to 1 still? Can we get that kind of price?
You can steal 18s with Unibet at the moment. So
well, good luck with that project anyway. But no, he is an interesting horse in that. You look at the Ascot race that he ran in last time. It was at the Shergar Cup, and I know you sort of look at Shergar Cup form, but the way that it's worked out suggests it might be stronger than your typical Shergar Cup. He beat Stars Over the Sea that day. Stars Over the Sea came out and ran away with the trial for this. I know he had the run of things and it probably flattered him a little bit, but he's come out and franked the form. There's another Ian Williams horse who hasn't stopped winning since, and I think he's won 3 since. His name is escaping me at the minute, but the form has just worked out really, really well. He's only gone up £3 for that. He's still well handicapped on his French form for Andre Fabre. He's taken a while for Andrew Balding to sort of find out exactly what he wants, but from what I've seen, 2 miles further than that is absolutely fine for him. And Stall 7, like I say, a low draw, even in one of these races where they've got so much time to sort themselves out, statistically it is still an advantage. So he ticks a lot of boxes for me at around 14 or 18 to 1, I should say.
Yeah, 14s generally, but if you're a bit of a keen shopper, you can pinch 16s and 18s in places. So We'll move on now to the Dewhurst. Unless there's anyone else you want to mention in
No, I think we've got the tri-cast covered, haven't we?
Yeah, and a lot less runners in this race, but no less competitive. Could turn out to be one of the races of the season, this. And you always seem to be on duty when Too Darn Hot is ready to run. We seem to be a bit of a fan club now.
Exactly, yeah. I can't really add too much more to what I've said the last times. The only thing I would say, you know, we talked that first time about his reputation. Well, since then his form has very much caught up. He's won his Group 3, he's won his Group 2. The form is right there that suggests he is ready to take that next step up, and he is a bona fide Group 1 horse. He couldn't have done any more really in the Champagne. It was a funny race how it sort of developed. He had the horses going off like stink in front, Dark Vision not running his racing behind, and it sort of a little bit of a letdown. It was just left to Phoenix of Spain to make him work the hardest, but he got the job done. He's unbeaten. We all know everything there is to know about his pedigree. He's even money. As even money shots go, I think you'll find worse even money shots, to be honest. I probably won't get stuck into him myself. I have a little bit of an issue about getting stuck in at real short prices, but you know, you're looking for negatives. There aren't too many. You could sort of question perhaps this is his first start on Faster Than Good. You know, he's raced on Good and Good to Soft. Whether he'll come down the dip on quickish ground, but it's nitpicking really. He's the form choice. The form that he's shown is good enough to win a typical Dewhurst. So, you know, that's what the kind of thing I ask for. If you're taking even money, you want to know that what the horse has done is enough to win a typical race, and in this case, it is.
We know what we think about him. He's our second highest rated 2-year-old at the moment. So in terms of form, he is the one to beat. Would you be more concerned, would it be a tactical thing if he is going to get beaten? You know, we've got a sprint in here more in the form of advertising. We've also got 3 Ballydor runners, and we know that they like to be tactical as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at how it's going to pan out, Too Darn Hot wouldn't want to sprint, would he? Anthony Van Dyke, from what we saw in the National Stakes, certainly wouldn't want to sprint. You know, he's the one that he's got the form in the book, which is only a pound behind Too Darn Hot. That National Stakes form looks rock solid, but he was under the pump a long way out there. That was 7 furlongs on good ground. It might be even quicker ground. You know, I do like Anthony Van Dyke, but it wouldn't have surprised me if they'd have said after the National Stakes that he's our Futurity Stakes horse. You know, a mile at Doncaster might be more his cup of tea than 7 furlongs on quickish ground at Newmarket. But, you know, in terms of what he's achieved, it's pretty much up there with Too Darn Hot. And again, you're looking at the price of him, 5 to 1 for his chance on form. Again, if somebody said to me, should I back Anthony Van Dyke, I wouldn't be saying don't, you know.
What do you think about Advertise? He is the only Group 1 winner in the field. That came in the Phoenix Stakes, first British runner to win it in 21 years, I think.
Yeah, certainly it's a race that's typically farmed by O'Brien, isn't it? But I think it tends to be the poor relation of the juvenile Group 1s. You know, you think back the lists of some of them, and if I said, remember Pedro the Great, most people say no. You know, and that's the kind of Group 1 that it sometimes can be. Advertise, he's done all of his racing at 6 furlongs. I think you can say he probably will stay 7, but will he improve for 7? I wouldn't be convinced. And you're looking at his Timeform rating, 126p adjusted. He's got a fair bit to find on form, and I find it very hard to make a case for him being able to win this.
I suppose those who follow Calix will be watching Advertise very closely, because the only blot on his copy was finishing behind him in the Coventry.
Yeah, exactly. He's almost in danger of becoming a bit of a forgotten horse, isn't he? Calix, not seen him since the Coventry, but you know what he showed in the Coventry was that he's certainly a smart 2-year-old, and fingers crossed. I believe he has made a full recovery. It's just that they've run out of time to find any races for him, but I believe, you know, he should be okay to have a clear run with him next spring. So, you know, let's hope that he can get back on track.
We don't have Calix, but we do actually have an Abdullah horse in here, and a potential fly in the ointment in Sangarius. He's only had 2 starts so far. He's been thrown in the deep end a bit. What have you made of him so far?
he's done all that you could ask for him to do, really. Like you say, he's 2 from 2, and you look at his physique, he looks the sort that is really going to develop well over the winter. Big, rangy, plenty of scope. His best days are definitely in front of him. My issue with him with regards to Dewhurst is essentially his price. I think you've got them in front of you. Can you just tell us what sort of price he is compared to the rest of them?
Yeah, I'll run through it quickly. Evens, 2 darn hot. 7-2 Sangarius. 4s, 5-1 Anthony Van Dijk. 8s advertised, 20s bar.
Yeah, so he's second favourite, but then you look at his form, you know, in terms of ratings, he's just got a fair bit to find. 2 darn hot, like we said, is 134p. Sangarius is just 120 with the large P. You know, he's really going to have to. He's going to need that large P to really kick in, isn't he? And it's just not factored into his price. We talk. I always go on about this, about ratings with these juveniles. It's as much about opportunity as ability. He hasn't had the same opportunity of what some of these have to run to a high rating. Most of these have tried group races. Obviously, he hasn't tried anything better than a listed race. So I think he's got loads of potential. I think he's going to be a really interesting horse, particularly for next year. But I just couldn't back him at 3-1 or 7-2, whatever it is, in a race that looks as deep as what this is.
Yeah, and even if you are sure about yourself that 2 darn hot is going to win, finding the forecast is quite a tricky task, really.
Yeah, I think so. I think, like I say, 2 darn hot around even money. I think you can make a perfectly good case for. Similarly, Anthony Van Dijk at around 5-1 is a decent enough bet as well. Either or, you know, Sangarius is the one that is sort of making the market a little bit for me, with him being a little bit too short.
Okay, anything else to add, or shall we move on?
I think we've covered it, really. You'd be surprised if anything else that was in there was anything more than a bit part player, I think.
Okay, we're now going to go to the first race on the card, the listed Zetland Stakes, and as you'd expect, there's 2 Ballydor runners in here that are prominent in the market, but the one who's favourite is Waldstern, who was beaten at Haydock last time, but that might not turn out to be that bad a performance in the end.
No, it was Kadar that beat him, who is a really well-regarded horse for Phoenix Thoroughbreds, well bred from an Aga Khan family related to Calanisi and Calaman. But I must say I'm still surprised to see Waldstern trading as favourite. I know he's got a really good pedigree. He's closely related to Voldgeist, who was placed in the ARP last week. But in terms of what he's achieved in those 2 runs in minor events, he's got a lot to find with those that have been playing the trading in group company. And you know, it's back to that argument that we just mentioned, ability and opportunity. Yes, Waldstern hasn't had the chance to run to a high rating, but equally his form is lagging a long way behind for a horse that's currently trading at around 9-4, 5-2.
Yeah, and next in the market are the 2 O'Brien horses. There's not much in between the prices. Sydney Opera House is 5-2, Norway's about 3-7-2. I think, judging by jockey bookings, Donica O'Brien's on Sydney Opera House. Is he the number 1 of the 2 of them?
I think it does look the case, doesn't it? But equally, O'Brien has won so many races with seemingly second string, third strings that if you fancy the second or third string, I really would not, you know, ever let that put you off. But I think I'm most interested in Sydney Opera House. He brings that real solid form to the table. He was placed behind Mohawk in the Royal Lodge at this course last time. He's got a really stout pedigree. You know, he's related to Rekindling amongst others. You know, obviously a Melbourne Cup winner. I think stepping up to a 1.25 miles as soon as possible, like they are doing, is a smart move. And in truth, a reproduction of what he did a fortnight ago or so, whatever it was. You know, it puts him bang there. For me, he's not favourite. He may not win, but he should be favourite.
And Norway's got a typical Aidan O'Brien profile in that he's scooted up in a maiden in Ireland and then is dropped into group company and could be anything, really.
Exactly, certainly bred to be. He's a brother to Ruler of the World that won the Derby and a half-brother to Duke of Marmalade that won countless Group 1 races, so he's certainly bred to be good. He's taken his time to win his maiden, but he looked really good from the front at Naas last time. Made all, forged clear in the closing stages. That was a mile on good to soft. Again, you'd be amazed if he's not even better over a mile and a quarter. These conditions will bring out improvement. And yeah, it wouldn't at all surprise to see him go really, really close. He's a horse that's very much an interesting one for next year. And you look at the winner of this race last year, was it Kew Gardens that won it, beat DXB, Coronet won it the year before. They upgraded this to listed status a while back, and that has definitely paid off. They've got stronger field as a result, and so it would not surprise at all if Norway, Sydney Opera House, possibly even Volstern, made into something like a Derby or St Ledger horse for next year.
Yeah, the market's got those three clear of the others. Looking further down, Nate the Great's about 10 to 1, but has had 3 starts at listed level already. Looks a little bit exposed, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's a race that looks to involve Volstern and the 2 O'Brien horses. The rest, like you say, their form is either lagging behind or they don't have the potential of the others. So I'd be very surprised if the winner didn't come from one of the first 3 in the betting.
Okay, so it would be Sydney Opera House for you then, that one?
Sydney Opera House, I think, is a decent bet, yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to the final one we're going to talk about now then. The second race on the card, 225, the Autumn Stakes, and it's probably worth starting on, well no, we've got a talking horse in here in the terms of Persian King, comes over here from France with a really big reputation, but could face one in Kadar whose form could be boosted by Volstern half an hour earlier. Yeah,
exactly, yeah, in terms of that, you would be looking to see how Volstern gets on to a pointer to Kadar, because at the moment it looks just a relatively ordinary minor event. It's worked out quite well, but the third horse that they beat, Prefontaine, he's gone on improved since, but it was only a nursery off a mark of 78 that he was winning off at Nottingham in the week. So as good as what Kadar looks potentially on paper, it cost €700,000 at the Breeze Ups this year. Say I mentioned that Aga Khan pedigree, so there's lots to like. The negative is his price. In terms of what he's done, yes, he's only had the one chance to do it, but for me, it's a little bit over-factored into his, all that potential is built into his short price.
What do you think it could be a case? I remember the race, he showed such a good attitude. Do you think that has sort of factored in as well, that he was knew his job so well on his debut and he's well bred, that it's sort of expected that he will just improve rather than,
Yeah, I think there's lots of things, we're certainly expecting him to improve based on that pedigree, and, he's obviously really well regarded. Carl Burke, the strength of that stable goes, they're getting better and better. He's got enough decent horses that he's been working it with, I would imagine, to have some sort of idea where he is in the pecking order, to think that, he can leave that form behind, but, there's doing it, and then there's backing him to do it at a short price, and it's just a case of every horse has a price that you have to look at and say, am I prepared to back it at that? In Kadar's case, he looks a little bit short for me.
Yeah, he's around about 3 to 1 at the moment, Kadar, but in front of him in the market at around about 2s at the minute is Persian King. Now, he comes over from France with Andre Fabre, a Kingman colt, but everything that's been said about him has been very exciting.
Yeah, he comes with a reputation, doesn't he? But even so, I was surprised that he was as big as 9 to 4 with that reputation, because you're looking at what he's achieved on track as well, and there is some substance behind that hype. He's won his last 2 starts. He was beaten by a well-regarded horse on debut. I think that it was a little bit disappointing in the Group 1 in France last week, but Persian King has certainly taken his form up a notch each time he's made it to the track, and it's worth logging into Equidia, I think it is. You can't find the videos on YouTube, but you can log into Equidia for free just via your Facebook account, and it's worth typing his name in and getting the videos, because he's a really imposing horse. He looks massive for a 2-year-old, so much size and scope, and whatever he does this year, you'd be amazed if he doesn't make into an even better 3-year-old. And presuming the fact he's coming to Newmarket, connections are wanting to have a little look to see how he handles the track. Farb has, down the years, run horses in the Newmarket Guineas. He doesn't always keep them at home, and I'm imagining that he sees this as a potential Guineas horse, and if he is that kind of quality, he needs to be beating these horses to keep himself on track for that.
I didn't know that about Akidia actually. It'd be a useful tool though. Come January,
exactly,
we
yeah.
need to do that.
Oh no, with at the races and it becomes, was it Sky Racing? It's becoming.
So, yeah. Now, as you'd expect, Aidan O'Brien has several in here. The shortest in the market is Magna Grecia or Grecia. Another one that was an emphatic winner in a maiden and is now dropped in the deep end.
Exactly, it's like, stop me if you've heard this before. He was really impressive, looked as though he's ready for a step up in grade, but hard to know exactly how good he's going to prove. And, you know, it's just the difficult thing with dealing with these horses that are still sort of open books. You know, they're still, what we know about him is only half of the story. Got quite a speedy pedigree for running over a mile at this stage of his 2-year-old career, you know, being by Invincible Spirit, but there is Galileo on the dam side. The way that he finished his race off, you'd expect him to stay a mile, but it must be said it wasn't a truly run race that he won at Naas, and it was his finishing speed that really sort of settled matters. So it'd be interesting to see how he does go if this is a testing mile, but another horse that looks to have lots of potential, but I'm not looking to back him with what he's achieved. He needs to have shown more.
Do you think the market's got it correct? Because the other two, Circus Maximus, he won last time despite being green, and then Western Australia has had a few more goes than the other two.
He has, yeah. I'd be surprised if Western Australia was good enough in this, and you just wonder if he's a bit part player to help out a stablemate. I'm not sure that the betting as such is correct. Like I say, I think Kadar is a little bit short for what he's achieved. Persian King, I would have had in shorter than 9-4, to be honest. It wouldn't have surprised me if it had been priced up around 6-4. I think he's got loads of potential. He's clear top rated on Timeform as it is. It wouldn't surprise me if he really sort of lays down the marker as a real potential Guineas horse, and that could make whatever happens in the Dewhurst extra significant with a view to next May.
Yeah, some of the more stingier bookmakers do actually have him at 6-4, so
yeah,
probably a theme of what will happen over the next few hours before Saturday.
Yeah, quite possibly. Say anything bigger than 2-1, I think, is worth having a go on.
Okay, Brilla, we'll end it on that then, unless there's anything else you want to add.
Don't think so, other than to say, you know, what a great card it is that we've got. And you know, it's a really exciting time for the flat season, isn't it? Hopefully we can sort of round everything up and we're not left with too many question marks ahead of next season. But you know, we haven't necessarily had lots of stars, but I think there's been lots of really interesting races, and roll on Champions Day next week as well. Yeah,
and I think with the flat season going to end, this could be your last one of the year, potentially.
Quite possibly, so, yeah. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. What I know about jumps racing, you could put on the back of a postage stamp. So we'll leave it to Dan Barber and co, I think.
Yeah, Dan's raring to go now.
Excellent.
So,
yeah.
Bro, cheers.